highlighted the importance of supporting cooperation and partnership between Egypt, Cyprus, and Greece to achieve security and stability in the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean regions. The statement hailed the fruitful relations witnessed recently between the three countries who have a unified vision on issues of mutual concern. Cypriot Minister of Defense Charalambos Petridis affirmed the importance of continuing coordination between the three countries, especially in the military field and joint training, as well as the exchange of expertise between the armed forces of the three countries. For his part, the Greek Minister of National Defense, Nikos Panagitopoulos, highlighted the importance of the outcomes of the tripartite meeting with Egypt and Cyprus, which would enhance the three countries' joint interests. He also hailed Egypt's effective role on the regional and international levels to achieve security and stability in the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean.
And as we said earlier, that Aswan Forum kick-started under the title Africa in an Era of Consecutive Dangers and Vulnerability to Climate Change, Sustainable Paths for a Peaceful Continent Capable of Withstanding Hardship. The forum comes within the framework of Cairo's keenness on pushing forward the Africa Work Agenda through the delicate phase international relations are going through. And to shed more light on the importance of this forum, we are joined over the phone by Dr. Tamer Abdulmenem Rodi. He is head of Economics Department, Faculty of Business, Ain Shams University. Good afternoon, Dr. Tamer.
Good afternoon.
So, sir, as I've just mentioned, that the forum is held under the title of Africa in an Era of Consecutive Dangers and Vulnerability to Climate Change, Sustainable Paths for a Peaceful Continent Capable of Withstanding Hardship. How do you read the theme of this conference?
Well, the theme just came in time. It is a time in which Africa, as the rest of the world, is recovering from the impacts of COVID-19.
Yes.
And is faced by the same threats that the whole world is facing concerning food security,
Yes.
resulting from the Russian-Ukrainian war. And the challenges has to be faced as a group of nations that hold on very powerful, coordinating between
Yes.
themselves to find up solutions for a better future. Add to that there are some aspects of the environmental impacts, environmental change, global warming, and other issues that face Africa as well. A unified coordination between the African nations is required more than ever in these delicate times.
Yes. Dr. Tamer, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi addressed the forum early in the day, and he said that Aswan Forum is a platform to discuss African files at a time of challenges. He also emphasized the idea of maintaining sustainable measures to maintain food security and that African cooperation and implementation of joint initiatives are important to achieve aspirations. How do you read President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's address to the conference early in the day?
Well, I read it as a very important step that has been following a lot of previous steps.
Yes.
For the last few years in bringing the African countries together and in bringing Egypt back to where it is a major player on the African scene. You know, when it comes to economic development, most of the African countries face the same thing. Most of the exports of African nations are directed towards Europe and the United States, a little bit going to China. And inter-country trade between the African nations is very little. Whereas the resources shared combined between all those nations can contribute to solving a lot of development issues.
Yes.
For those countries.
Yes.
So food security, for example, everybody knows that there are vast agricultural areas available within Africa that can feed all of Africa, can probably secure food for Africa for the next 100 years. What is required is a lot of ability and political will to coordinate together and to direct trade between African countries. It is a step that is so encouraged. It is Egypt playing its natural role in Africa, and it is a very good, welcome comeback. And we hope that such conferences, such forums, will contribute to concrete results in which deals can be made, agreements can be made, and a greater understanding of the importance of coordinating and looking at development from what we call as economists south-to-south trade, as one of those ways of solving the problem of bad balance of payments with developed countries and having most of the exports trying to be directed only to developed nations. This is not really increasing the competitive advantage of African nations, and by focusing on those issues, more solutions can be found in the short term.
Yes, Dr. Tamer, also the President emphasized on women and youth empowerment as the backbone of development to the African continent. How do you see this, and to what extent women and youth empowerment is essential in the coming period?
The President's strategy within the last few years, since he took office, has been very much focusing on youth. Based on the understanding of the Egyptian population pyramid, in which, the bottom of that pyramid is full and so rich of youth. Egypt is a very youthful country, and so is the rest of Africa. The age coming requires a great deal of concentration of how to get youth involved in all aspects of both political and economic life. And I think that it is great that the President is addressing the rest of the African nations the same way he is addressing Egypt and Egyptian youth. Add to this also that a great development issue is empowering women. It has been a cornerstone of economic policies all over the world for the last several years. And it has been a cornerstone in Egypt as well. And the evidence can be witnessed in the shape of the Egyptian Parliament House, for example, and the Egyptian government as a whole. And relaying the same message to Africa is indeed in coordination with the sustainable development goals. And it's indeed one of the challenges that is not only facing Egypt, but the rest of the African continent as well.
Yes.
And Egypt can set a role model and a great example based on the policies that has been taken within the last few years, empowering women. Add to it as well that the impact of things like the COVID and the Ukrainian war would highly affect women. They are very sensitive to poverty, work issues, food security issues, such as threat that is facing the whole of the continent and needs to be addressed immediately.
Yes, Dr. Tamer, the President also has talked about the climate change and to what extent it is affecting sustainable development in different African countries. So what's your comment on this?
See, most of the African nations are going to be negatively impacted by the global warming issue.
Yes.
Most of the African nation has not addressed the circular economy issues. And most of those nations are trying. Again, Egypt has been setting an example. If you look at the last few years, an incredible set of projects have been established for renewable energy, for recycling, and for clean water and irrigation issues. And the same has to be extended to the rest of Africa. And it requires a lot of knowledge, requires a lot of investment, and requires a set of understanding and coordination to come up with targets that can be achieved. Most of the African nations have already applied strategies, have put some broad lines of what needs to be done. And what is lacking now is the coordination. If you look how some areas, agricultural land, can be changed because of the impact of global warming. If you see how the threat of sea levels of water sea levels increasing can affect how many seafront land areas. All of those are problems that require a whole lot of coordination between African nations. At
Yes.
times like this, coordination is a must. And that's a very good thing that the African Summit, or the forum, ASEAN Forum, is focusing on such issues.
Yes, so sir, also the continent is home to at least half of the fastest growing economies of the world, while it is rich in resources and is riding a wave of urbanization, industrialization and economic diversification. Will Africa's importance in the global economy expected to rise both as a market and as an engine of global growth?
This is what we all hope for and expect.
Yes.
The one concrete fact is Africa is so rich with natural resources and with human resources. What Africa probably really needs is a whole lot of education of how to use those resources and the capital required to make it efficient while using those resources.
Yes.
By focusing on those two aspects, you expect that a whole lot of development can be achieved in a shorter time than other countries that have been leading the way to development. When a country is still lacking the use of its full resources, they are always going to have, when those resources are used, a higher growth rate. And it is to no surprise that the rest of the world would look at many of African nations as ones with potential to grow much faster in the future. And that includes Egypt, in which Egypt is lucky enough to have positive forecasts for the coming periods, and it had positive forecasts and it had positive growth rates even during the highest of the impact of COVID-19.
Yes. And in your opinion, what are the challenges that are still facing the African countries and need the cooperation between African nations?
Well, there are a whole lot of issues, and you can divide them into several parts. One big part are the political issues in which there are still tensions between countries and within the country between different tribes of different ethnic groups.
Yes.
And that's very common in Africa. The second part is the infrastructure required for development. You need a whole set of new railroads, ports, and communications, even though Africa has been doing really well recently when it comes to ICT. And it's very promising in that line. But infrastructure required for development has to be established. Now, if you look at some of the plans that have been already partially implemented, for example, you've got plans of highways that connects all the way from Cairo to South Africa, and each country will have to take part within its own borders. A whole lot of such projects are a must for trade to prosper between those nations, to increase exponentially. You need airports, ports, and then you can focus more on how each country can share its agricultural crops and investment in agriculture with neighboring countries to solve some of the food security issues. You will see some of those countries having competitive advantages in new industries in which exports can prosper and grow. So the problems of Africa is just like any other developing nation, but political problems, infrastructure problems, ethnic problems, and those are all within this globalized world, which soon be solved gradually.
Yes. So finally, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Tamer Abdelmenem Radi, Head of Economics Department, Faculty of Business Ain Shams University. Thank you, sir, for being with us, and give viewers a short break, and we'll be back, so stay tuned.